Guys, in trying to get this channel together and stay on top of useful and relevant topics for you, I end up going back to the hard lessons that I had to learn. Things that sidelined me early on, things that set me back, things that caused a lot of wasted time and effort. Now, I'm really grateful I had that opportunity because finding things out the hard way really solidified my role as an authority, and I think it made me a lot better at identifying those problems in other people and helping them to get through it. So I'm grateful for that. But if we are all on that path, if we are all trying to derive training principles from scratch, then none of us are going to get very far. So I decided to come up with a list. These are 10 things that I wish I knew that would have set me up. None of these are cheat codes. These aren't things that are going to spoil the plot for you. You are still going to get just as much out of your training, but you should actually end up spinning your wheels less and learning more because of it. So thing number one, this is going to apply more specifically to newbies, people that are gun shy, people that are hesitant to go and put themselves out there and be exposed and vulnerable in front of other people. Do not look at yourself as a guest in somebody else's space. I had trouble with this when I started. I was kind of young in high school. I was 12 years old going into my freshman year. And when I started playing football, I was the youngest guy there by a couple of years. And it was intimidating to be there with like grown seniors who were basically adults. And I was this chubby kid trying to figure out how to train for the first time. I remember how mortified I was going in and doing anything in the gym because I knew I looked stupid. And that built a very negative association to the point where I didn't want to train. Thankfully, I got over that pretty quickly. But with new trainees, I make a big deal about saying, don't hesitate, don't put your head down, don't feel like you're in other people's way, because that's not the case. Even you guys that have been around for a while, that are working up the guts to go to that hardcore powerlifting gym down the street, understand that these communities thrive off of the new people that sign up and keep their ranks up. And you're going to find 10 supportive, positive, helpful people to every one elitist dickhead. It's one of the reasons this arena has grown so much is because there really is a noticeable, positive, supportive component to it. So don't hesitate, go in, expose yourself, talk to some people, and put that best foot forward. You're gonna find that you grow a lot faster, and before long, you're going to feel right at home in those spaces. And real quick, guys, if you found any of this educational, helpful, entertaining, please consider hitting subscribe. This channel is doing some big things. We're putting out content every single day. You don't want to miss anything. I appreciate everybody's support. It has been absolutely invaluable. Thing number two, big lifts are most of it, but not all of it. Now, this is a biggie because I know I got stuck for years doing the same few pep movements week in, week out. I did a lot of bodybuilding work when I was younger. Thankfully, a lot of variety I was exposed to because I read a lot of bodybuilding materials, because that's the only thing that existed back in 2000, pretty much. Eventually, I figured out that, hey, if I do compound movements and if I go really heavy and if I do a lot of work just in that range, I build up a lot of skill and I get very strong. The problem is I neglected a bunch of other areas that led to me hitting a wall faster and then not having enough tools to get over that wall. So if all you're going to do is a couple of movements in a narrow rep range, there isn't a lot of wiggle room when things get stale. And you also want to expose yourself to other things you might not be comfortable with. Things like cardio and stretching, things that are essential for basically being a functioning human being, because the more you slack on those things, the more holes you're going to get in your game. And it's not just going to make you less useful, it's going to impact your training. And that actually brings me directly into point number three, which is that strength by itself is like gasoline without a flame. I wish I knew that early on because I romanticized strength. When I was new, I thought being strong just meant you were like Superman and you could do anything. Strength is extremely important to being the best version of yourself you could be, especially if you're trying to play a sport. Strength can absolutely be the game changer between you and your opponent. If you can bring that to the game, you have this ace in your sleeve. But having an ace in your sleeve doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to play poker. So having skill, strength, knowledge, and these other assets, that is the most important part of being strong because it makes sure you know how to apply that strength once you actually get it. I wish somebody would have told me this one thing when I was 12 years old. If you are very, very strong and in bad shape, that is worse than just being in bad shape. You will gas out faster, you will do worse in a fight. Anytime you do try to demonstrate strength in something that lasts longer than 30 seconds, which is most things, you're going to end up on your back like a wide-mouthed bass out of water, just mouth open, gasping for air. You're going to look pathetic. And the way that most people cope with that is they just never do those things. So they always stay in this narrow lane where they have proficiency and they never have to address those things. It is important not just to be a useful human being, which I would argue you have some obligation to be, but it's also going to affect your training. So being strong is great. Chase those strength gains, but don't sleep on the other things. Don't sleep on building size. Don't sleep on being well-rounded, focusing on weak points, doing things that you might find uncomfortable. Go for a hike. Go try out jiu-jitsu. Do a light yoga session. You'll be surprised at what taking your own physicality seriously does for all of the other goals that you have in regards to being strong in the gym. Number 4, be mindful of the salesman. This is really important because everybody has an incentive to sell you something. And this field, more so than it selects for people who are really knowledgeable and have a lot of good information for you, this field selects more for people that are good at capturing audience attention. So these people that rise to the top, definitionally, they're going to be really good at the type of language that gets your attention. They're going to be more interesting, more charismatic, more captivating. And these are the people that are the best at selling you something. That doesn't just mean they have a supplement or a program. It means that they are trying to represent a brand or an aura of themselves in a way that's appealing to you. And a lot of times that lacks authenticity. Liver King is the absolute best example we have of this. It's not so much that he was selling something that was bunk or harmful, which he really wasn't. It's more that he built this character that was specifically designed to be a piece of the sales strategy, and that he was blurring the lines between who he was and who this character is. And there are a lot of people that do that. You put a camera in front of somebody's face and you tell them to talk like they know what they're talking about. Everybody is going to drop the bass in their voice. They're going to project a little louder, and they're going to speak with authority. The biggest bullshit barometer you have is when people try to act like they have special knowledge that only they and other people don't have, that knowledge is the most important thing and it's what separates you from everybody else. And when they speak in absolute terms, as if this is really the only thing you should be doing, and they ignore the nuance of like other use cases or other trade-offs or when other things might be important. So be very mindful of the people that are trying to sell you something because they're everywhere. I fell into that when I was young. I spent way too much time trying West Side because my young mind thought that that's what authentic powerlifting was. And I had no reason to think that other than they insisted that that was the case. Don't make the mistake of thinking that confidence equates to authority because it's often not the case. Number 5, dirty bulking is a bad trade. This is something I had to walk back because I actually did a dirty bulking video a couple of years ago. Now, dirty bulking does exactly what it's supposed to do. It adds a lot of mass onto your body. And in the absence of PEDs, eating a shit ton of processed food has a very drug-like effect on your body's ability to grow muscle and grow strength. The problem is it screws with your endocrine system, makes you pre-diabetic, and gets you fat as shit. Not only are you going to look worse, but you're going to feel worse throughout the day. Shoving in the Hershey's bar every hour on the hour, doing the J.M. Blakely bulk or the C.T. Fletcher bulk, that leads you to getting a thicker midsection, to having a bloated face and neck. Your sleep gets worse. After every meal, you're lethargic. You have trouble doing basic stuff day to day. Dirty bulking sucks. Now, there is a rare scenario I can imagine where somebody is able to commit themselves to doing a really nasty bulk, adding a bunch of size and strength, and then going on a dedicated cut to get their body fat back down. Very, very few people are going to have the discipline to do that. Most people are just going to use it as an excuse to eat what they want when they want, to satisfy their boredom or their volatile emotions with food that tastes good. And they're going to get fat. They're going to make that cycle spiral out of control. And they're never going to dedicate themselves to actually losing the weight they need to lose. The people that do have that dedication are better off eating like bodybuilders anyways. And that's why bodybuilders eat that way. And they don't really go through these dirty bulk, clean cut cycles. So dirty bulking is a bad trade-off. I wish I knew that when I was younger because I spent a lot of years eating a bunch of shit, Pop-Tarts, Mountain Dew after every workout, a liter of chocolate milk. And I got really strong, but I looked and felt like shit. And right now I'm older, I'm past my prime, but I'm leaner, stronger, more functional. I look better, I feel better than I did in my early 20s. And that is 100% because I'm taking my diet more seriously. So that's really important. Number 6, aesthetics matter. This kind of ties into the last point. I do wish that I had more of a sense that aesthetics were really important, and I think you should take them seriously too. Not because you need to look a certain way or you shouldn't be happy with your physique or your body, but because people tend to over-romanticize the function over form thing. It's easy to over-romanticize what your strength goals mean, to try to assign this substance and meaning to it that maybe like bodybuilders don't have or physique guys don't have, because they're all show and no go and that's all superficial, and it's just leading people to believe they're strong even though they're really not. The thing is, if you are training in a way that prioritizes performance and you getting better over time, your body fat should be going down, your muscle mass should be going up, you should be looking better. If you're doing work that rounds out weak areas, you should be looking better. If your arms are a lot smaller than your shoulders and back, guess what? You're not going to bench as much as you theoretically could. Similarly with your other limbs and extremities. So paying attention to aesthetics is a good way to kind of by default keep yourself in a position where you're going to do better and going to be more competitive. It actually does reinforce your performance. Number 7, comebacks are quick. This is one I've preached a lot with all the injuries I've had. Every time I do a bracing video, I talk about how many times I've had to take a couple months off of deadlifting and squatting because of the excruciating pain I was in, and how many times I had to crawl back. Now, when I was younger, I remember getting mortified when I found out that when you gain strength, you don't just have that level of strength now. I always thought that every PR you hit, that's just how strong you are now. I didn't realize how quickly you detrain and how fast those qualities go away. But that shouldn't be disheartening. That should be empowering, because the fact is comebacks are very quick, so that gives you the ability to take a step back when you need to. When you are injured, when you are hurt, when you're tired of just piling on more pig iron, and you feel like shit and training isn't fun anymore, it is too easy to take a step back, let yourself clear out, and then come back in this dedicated fashion where you can climb back up, build some momentum, and now hopefully you feel better, you've addressed some issues. It's too easy, and I think that's important to long-term longevity. I know it sounds good to be like, I've never missed a workout in 15 years. But the fact is, when I did start missing workouts on purpose, when I did have dedicated periods of recovery to let myself clear out, the cycles after just went so much better, and long term, I'm better for it. So know when to take your foot off the gas. Comebacks happen quick. I broke my leg and I had to stop any load bearing for 3 months, and I only had a couple months of squatting when I came back before I hit an all-time PR. Comebacks happen very fast, so keep that in mind. Number 8, there is no such thing as optimal. There's just different use cases. This is the thing that fries me most of all when it comes to people trying to oversell their brand of training. This goes back to the salesman point. Optimal doesn't exist. So the people trying to say that their way of doing things is the best or the only way, you can only say that if you eliminate every individual scenario, if you eliminate the nuance that comes with figuring out individuals' training history, what their goals are, how they respond to things. There are a lot of things in this space that work. They just have their own set of rules. Also, the individuals who are hyper-focused on optimizing their training, who will go through article after article and just scroll through endless discussion forums trying to figure out what the best technique for their seated dumbbell curl is, or really trying to pick apart these different pieces of training. I had somebody in the comments talk about the Pendlay rows I put in my mass program, and he said that Paul Carter says that Pendlay rows aren't good because there's no eccentric and they're not great for hypertrophy. There has never been somebody whose upper back didn't grow because they spent too many years focusing on Pendlay rows as opposed to some other exercise, some other mode of training. All of these different exercises, whether they use cheat reps and momentum and overload, or whether they emphasize range of motion and control and tempo, they all have a trade-off and they all have different use cases. And they all work. Like if Pendlay rows didn't get you bigger, then push presses and croc rows wouldn't either. But we know that those are really, really good. Overloaded developmental movements. So the worst thing you can do is waste time and energy hemming and hawing. The best thing you can do is to go out and experiment and try to put things into practice, be enthusiastic, attack them, do them long enough to get better at them, and then take notes, chart what the progress looked like. You might be surprised in what you find out ends up working for you. Number 9, and this is a big one. As far as strength is concerned, technique is just about familiarity and consistency as it is efficiency. We often end up thinking that the most efficient setup for our body type that's going to cut range of motion and put us in the most optimal position to exploit our leverages, that's the best technique. And we end up trying to fight out little bits of technical improvement over the years as we wiggle around our feet millimeters at a time, and we constantly practice different cues to get more torque or to get our knees out or to keep our chest up. You get good at how you train. So even if the way that you move isn't the best or most optimal, the dedication, the commitment to moving that way over and over and over is going to make you better and more proficient in that setup, and you can potentially get very, very big and very, very strong in a position that might not be considered the best or the most refined technique. And that's really for you guys that are gonna hyper focus on technique and use it as an excuse not to do hard work, not to be consistent, to constantly go back to the drawing board. You are not going to technique your way up to another PR. That brings us to number 10, which is that 10 rep maxes are more important than 1 rep maxes. This is also something that was a very hard lesson for me to learn because I spent a lot of years chasing 1 rep maxes, doing a lot of singles, doubles, triples. I did get strong in that time, but I also got very out of shape and I stopped growing, and that was a big problem. It wasn't until I went back to the drawing board and started chasing higher rep goals that I ended up turning my physique around, rounding out weak areas, and I got out of that rut. And that was a big game changer. Also, from a usefulness standpoint, the type of strength that you need that's gonna make you better at anything requires some basic amount of stamina and muscular endurance. So power athletes who can jump very high and lift the world, but they gas out after 15 seconds, they end up being kind of useless in a lot of real world circumstances. Now, the way around that is to just take your athleticism seriously. So if you are one of those power athlete types, get out of your comfort zone, do some other things to round yourself out. But it wasn't until I really started dedicating myself to chasing things like 10 and 15 rep maxes that my motor got better. I started doing better in strongman, and it's why I can place high in static events against guys who lift 100, 150 pounds more than me. Anything you do in the real world that is supposed to take your strength and put it into practice is going to require a basic amount of endurance, so don't sleep on it. You are going to get a lot more mileage out of your training if you chase rep maxes, if you have a lot, even if it's just a back off set at the end of your heavy stuff. If you have a lot of work that's dedicated towards getting you into those later reps, you're going to have more conditioning, you're going to be exposing yourself to a lot more volume, it's going to be a better muscle building stimulus, and it's also going to develop a lot of strength, especially if it's in conjunction with some of the other heavy work. The point is, don't be a one-trick pony. Having a really, really high 1 rep max without a lot of other stuff, it's kind of useless. That's kind of the theme of this list. So that's all I got for today, guys. Let me know what you think about the list. If you've had issues with any of these, let me know what some of your training epiphanies were that were game changers when it came to growing and staying injury-free and staying excited about training. Leave all that in the comments. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.